Alec, are we live and now recording?
And we're live and recording.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome back, colleagues. Of course, we started this meeting at 5 p.m. as we had to go into closed about an entirely unrelated matter, I assure you. We've dealt with that. It was really addressing the campus board appointments and more news on that in the coming weeks. So we paused the meeting at 5:30 and we are now resuming the meeting. So welcome to all those who are here this evening for either the council meeting or the committee of adjustment. I will ask colleagues for disclosures of interest in regards to any items on the agenda this evening. Any disclosures, colleagues? Seeing none, I'll move on. Of course, we do have a consent agenda this evening. There are two items. One is council meeting minutes from April 14th, 2021. And we do also have on the consent agenda the appointment of building officials. And we have David McGarren in regards to the appointment. Does anyone want an item removed from the consent agenda? I see nothing from council colleagues. Ms. Babcock-Cormier, do we need a motion to accept the consent agenda? I keep forgetting. We do, right? Okay, so perhaps I can ask Deputy Mayor and Councillor Strachan, can you move and second adoption of the consent agenda as presented, please?
Yes.
Good. I'll call the question. All in favor, please. Good. That gets us through our consent agenda. And it brings us to the public meetings and the zoning bylaw amendments proposed for this evening. There were several. And of course, the first one is in regards to County Road 19. It's ZBA 1120. And I believe in that respect, there is a public notice for us to commence the public meeting this evening. Is that the case, Ms. Babcock-Cormier?
Yes, you're correct, Your Worship.
Okay. I don't have the text in front of me, so perhaps someone else can read it.
I can, Your Worship.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Council will now hold a virtual public meeting to consider an application for lands legally described as 5870 County Road 19. From Highway Commercial C327 to Residential Fourth Density Special Exception R413 to accommodate the development of 4 low-rise apartment buildings. The lands at 5870 County Road 19 are also the subject of a concurrent application for Kevlar Developments, file number B102-103-104-19 under the Planning Act. I must advise you that this meeting is your opportunity to voice any objections or concerns you may have with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. If an appellant does not provide comments at this public meeting or written submissions before council adopts the proposed amendment, the local planning appeal tribunal may refuse to consider their objections. Any person who wishes further notice of the council's decision concerning this matter should give their full name, address, and postal code to Amy Martin, Director of Planning and Development Services, via email following adjournment of this public meeting. Contact information can be found on the notice of public meeting and will be provided at the end of the presentation. Anyone wishing to ask a question during the public meeting can do so by using the raise hand feature on Zoom. When asking a question, please identify yourself and provide your address and postal code for the clerk to record as part of the public record. Are there any people here for this public meeting? If so, could you please acknowledge yourself through the raise hand feature on Zoom? Thank you. I will now pass the meeting over to Amy Martin, Director of Planning and Development.
Thanks, Heather.
Perfect. Thank you. I'll just wait for Pollock to get the slides up. So I'll be providing a presentation, and the developers consultant as well will have a presentation that will walk more through the site plan details of the site. So I'm just going to provide a policy overview and the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. Next slide, please. So I thought it appropriate at this point to speak to where we're at within the process. So consent was granted by the United Counties in 2019. Sorry, I apologize. The application number should be 10219, 10319, and 10419. So what essentially happened in the first step is they severed land from 3 different land holdings to consolidate into one larger piece to allow for the development. Earlier this year, Council passed an official plan amendment on February 10th to redesignate the lands from commercial to residential. Once this was passed by council, it was sent to the United Counties, who are the approval authority for our local official plan amendments. They approved the official plan amendment on March 25th, and the appeal period ended on April 14th, and the bylaw to redesignate the lands from commercial to residential is now in effect, and the lands are designated as residential. So the zoning bylaw amendment is the matter that we're here to discuss tonight, and it's to rezone the lands to permit the multi-residential development. There is another step beyond the zoning bylaw amendment that is still in process and will not be considered tonight, but at a future council meeting, and that's site plan control. So at a future meeting of council, the site plan document will come before council for final discussion and approval. Next slide, please. Just so to familiarize everyone where the site is, it's located behind the Giant Tiger, between the Giant Tiger and the Forest Creek subdivision, and frontage is off of County Road 19. Next slide, please. Here's imagery of what, Councillor Sullivan. You're muted.
Sorry, I think that subject land is smaller than it should be. It really extends further over.
Yeah, it's thank you. My error, I apologize. Trying to use the little mouse pad to create maps. It should extend further out along the back there, as in line with the first image. And you'll see more of that demonstrated on the site plan. Okay. Next page. Yep. Thanks. Next slide, please. So here's the proposed development, the higher level view. I know Fotan will go through in more detail the site plan and zoom in on specifics. But the proposal would be for 4 multi-residential buildings that are 3 stories in height. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, the application that has been submitted would rezone the property from the current highway commercial exception zones to the residential 4th density special exception holding. The holding will be required on the file to ensure that a site plan agreement is entered into for the development of the property. As previously mentioned, the properties were subjected to severance applications and official plan amendment number 3, as mentioned earlier. And the rezoning would permit up to 4 3-story apartment buildings on the property with some site-specific conditions. Next slide, please. So when we review Planning Act applications, we have to review the policy considerations that would dictate how development is to grow. And part of that is the consideration of our provincial policy statement. So the provincial policy statement is the planning policy document that's put out by the provincial government, and it dictates just a general vision for planning in Ontario. So the PPS promotes the wise use of land and resources and efficient development patterns that ensure efficient use of infrastructure. And it also states that land use patterns within a settlement area shall be based on densities and a mix of land uses which efficiently use land and resources, are appropriate for the infrastructure and public service facilities which are planned or available, and avoid the need for their uneconomical expansion. So really focusing on development within our serviced areas where they can be supported. Next slide, please. Underneath the provincial policy statement, we have the United Counties of Leeds and Granville official plan. So the official plan at the county level provides general planning policy for development across all of Leeds and Granville. So the county official plan conforms to the provincial policy statement, and then our official plan conforms to the counties, and then it's that tiered effect. So as per the county official plan, it promotes development in settlement areas that makes efficient use of land, resources, infrastructure. And it also states that urban settlement areas are to accommodate a broad range of uses, and that permitted uses and related policies are to be established further within our local official plans. Next slide, please. So in our urban service area official plan policies, there are policies related to the development of residential developments. And this includes to direct the expansion of residential development into appropriate areas based on availability of municipal services and in a form which can be integrated with established land use patterns. Support the provision of a choice of dwelling types according to location, size, affordability, tenure, design, and accessibility so that a broad range of housing requirements are satisfied, and encourage infill residential development and intensification in areas where existing land uses are not adversely affected and where development can efficiently utilize existing municipal services and facilities. Next slide, please. So this chart was included within the report, which can be viewed on the website. It details the proposed development, where it complies and where they do need exceptions. And I'm going to walk through in more detail where those exceptions are.
Amy,
yep.
I did see Mr. Noseworthy's hand up. I didn't know if he still wanted to ask a question. No?
I
We
think he
can't hear
raised
you,
it.
Robert.
Sorry, my hand was left up from the,
Okay,
here for the
excellent.
public meeting.
Thank
Yeah.
you. I appreciate that.
And just a comment, so there will be a period for questions and comments from both members of council and from the public after the formal presentations.
Not a problem.
Yep.
Okay, keep going.
Next slide, please, Pollock. So again, these next few slides just demonstrate, what the requirements are of the R4 zone and for what's being proposed. As you can see that the privacy yard provisions and the play space and amenity space will be varied, and I'll get into a little more detail of that later in the presentation, and consolidating that with on the site into one central location. Next slide, please. And again, this slide speaks to the parking and some of the parking reductions that they're going to seek are not related to the number of spaces, but more so the relation of parking spaces to habitable windows. So just more of the on-site conditions. Next slide, please. So the first exception that's being sought and will be part of the special exception zoning is the privacy yard amenity space provision. So the proposed design for the multi-residential development will feature a shared amenity space. The zoning bylaw does allow for the provision of recreation space for dwellings that do not have privacy yards, and the proposed zoning amendment would permit the privacy yards to be consolidated with this within the amenity space being provided on the site. The play space requirement of section 16.2E and 6.5A and C will be permitted to consolidate with the amenity space being provided on site with the zoning bylaw amendment. Next slide, please. As for the parking, the proposed layout of the multi-residential units will require reductions for parking spaces from a habitable room window and seek permission to provide shared access to a commercial loading space. The location of parking spaces on site varies in setback from habitable room windows, with certain parking spots located within 3.7 meters of a habitable window. The minimum requirement in the zoning bylaw is currently 6 meters. The exception zone for the property would permit a minimum setback, as mentioned, of 3.7 meters from a habitable window to a parking space. As mentioned, the proposed development will provide 105 parking spaces, which meets the zoning bylaw requirements. Parking areas will be set back a minimum of 4 meters from the shared property lines of the shared property with Forest Creek subdivision, which exceeds the minimum requirement of 1.5 meters. And the exception zone for the proposed development, as mentioned, would permit a shared driveway for the loading access to the back of the giant tiger. So the site design uses the existing entrance that exists with currently for access to giant tiger. Next slide, please. And then the last provision pertains to density bonusing. So the request is to increase the density of the property from 45 units to 48 units. Currently, the official plan permits up to a maximum of 45 units per hectare. So the request is to increase it from 48 units per hectare. In the report, it also details, so it goes, with the square footage that equals out to is reducing it from 230 square meters per unit down to 206 square meters per unit. So in exchange for an increase in density in accordance with section 14.2B of the official plan, 17% of the rental units will be offered and provided at an affordable rental rate. Again, this is a requirement that when we're doing density bonusing, that we can ask for in exchange for the increase in density. And this is solidified within the site plan agreement process. Next slide, please. So I wanted to go through, and I do want to read out some names of people who have submitted comment. The comments that were received by the municipality, there were a lot of common themes. So what I've tried to do tonight is address the concerns raised more thematically, to be very repetitious to go through them. But I do want to acknowledge that Bill Kozak did provide a letter on behalf of the Forest Creek Neighborhood Association with a list of concerns, including building height, the proposed pathway, loss of privacy, loss of property values, stormwater management, traffic, the snowmobiles that use the rail trail and their access to 43 and Parkland. We received comments from Jennifer Dion, including her opposition to the proposed development, which included the pathway, the need for fencing along rear property lines, the concerns and opposition to the consolidation of amenity space on the property for the apartment units themselves, and the increased density for the minimal number of units that would be created as affordable. Russell Dion submitted a letter in opposition to the proposed development. Concerns raised included the height of the proposed development and a request to cap the height of the buildings at 11 meters, and as well concerns about the increase in density on the property. Diane Francoeur raised concerns regarding the proposed development, including fencing for the lots backing on to the property, and fencing more so around the stormwater management pond in Forest Creek. So the concern there was as potential for more residents, if they do access that walking path, those residents who have houses that back on would lose some of their privacy just from an increase in people accessing the area. Melissa Beeman submitted concerns regarding the removal of the trees. We had a letter from Chico and Suzanne Fata, who are in objection to the development, and they raised concerns over the pathway. And then Dawn and Jesse Buwalda raised a number of concerns, including the proposed pathway, tree removal, and questioned whether the site was suitable for the 4 buildings, and suggested maybe 3 buildings were more appropriate. And they also commented on the lack of green space and traffic. Just need a sip of water just one second. I do want to stress tonight that the site plan agreement is still in process, and that some of the items that have been raised can be addressed through that process. So when we're talking about fencing and landscaping, those are addressed in the site plan document itself. But if there's any questions, I mean, FOTEM will do more of a presentation on those site elements. Next slide, please. So to address the building height, we had, as mentioned, owners had raised concerns over the proposed 3-story construction, including the loss of privacy in neighbors' backyards. The proposed development is set at 12 meters in height, which is below the permitted maximum height of 14 meters in the R4 zone. The buildings are being cited to reduce the impact of the development on the Forest Creek subdivision. So care was taken to try to site the buildings so that the least amount of the building was facing the Forest Creek subdivision. Landscaping will be utilized to also help create a visual buffer between the development and the subdivision. And I just wanted to note that the current commercial zoning does permit up to a height of 13 meters. Next slide, please. So traffic has been raised on numerous occasions. So the proposed development will create 84 apartment dwelling units and an increase in traffic in the area. This was a question we received. Will a traffic study be done to address the proposed development? So we did have a traffic study submitted as part of the development submission requirements. The traffic impact study did not identify any required intersection upgrades along County Road 19 to support the development. And it was supportive that the existing roadway could support the traffic from the site. The counties are the review authority on the traffic impact study, as it is their roadway. I would also note on the site plan, there is a plan for access to the apartment buildings beside the giant tiger. So that will help outlet people that way out of the site as well. Next slide, please. Some of the it was quite a few more generalized concerns, including snowmobilers losing access to County Road 43, potentially bringing them into the Forest Creek subdivision, the proposed pathway that would connect into the Forest Creek subdivision over a municipal block, into the pathway that's to run along the southern portion of the development. There were concerns over the influx of individuals coming into the subdivision to walk their dogs. There was concerns that Westera Way would become an overflow parking area should a pathway be established, as well as the loss of property values in the subdivision and the loss of privacy. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, the proposed pathway would connect, as it stands right now, would connect into the Forest Creek subdivision over a municipal block of land, creating linkages between the subdivision and the proposed development. This linkage to that pathway on Kevlar's site would connect from County Road 19 all the way over to the Kentville Living Retirement Community and eventually provide access for the future commercial development that is planned to occur along 43. There are 105 on-site parking spaces that will be provided, including 5 accessible parking spaces. This meets the requirement of the zoning bylaw. We had no evidence provided that to support the argument of the loss in property value from the development of the retirement community. There was concerns that over the impact of that development. And landscaping and fencing will be provided as additional privacy screening between the proposed development and the Forest Creek subdivision. And that's something that can be addressed again through the site plan agreement as a requirement, and more so on the fencing side. Next slide, please. Stormwater management was also raised on quite a few occasions. The flow of stormwater from the proposed development through the Forest Creek subdivision was raised as a concern. Questions were raised over the capacity of the stormwater conveyance system within the Forest Creek subdivision. So the proposal for stormwater management on site would be that 50% of the stormwater from the site would be directed through the Forest Creek stormwater conveyance system, and then the other 50% would be directed towards County Road 43, both outletting west towards the creek. The municipality, county, and RVCA have reviewed the stormwater management report and are satisfied that there is capacity within the Forest Creek subdivision stormwater conveyance system to take on additional capacity for the proposed development. And it's my understanding in discussions with our engineering coordinator that when the Forest Creek subdivision was going through its engineering design phase, those lands, stormwater runoff from those lands were accommodated within the design. Major storm events were also considered as a part of the engineering analysis. So the standards are for those 1 in 100 year storm events. They need to be able to accommodate through stormwater management. Next slide, please. Parkland continued to be raised again as to why the municipality didn't take 5% of the land as parkland. So through our land severance processes, the municipality has the option to either take 5% of the land for parkland or take cash in lieu for that parkland. The municipality requested cash in lieu over taking parkland for a few reasons. One of those was that the proposed site would have created a very small area for parkland. So at 0.5 acres, it really wouldn't have left a lot of opportunity to create an effective park, let alone address items as to where would you provide parking on site for the park without actually taking away from that space. The smaller lot frontage also made it very difficult to provide parkland while still providing access and frontage along an open and maintained road. So that was also a concern, and trying to locate it on other parts of the property would have created a landlocked parcel, and you need to ensure that you have those linkages. Landscaped amenity space will be provided on site for the development, as well as the establishment of a walkway along the southern property line, connecting the property, as mentioned, from County Road 19 over to the retirement living building. Next slide, please. Increased density, as mentioned, was raised. The official plan, like I have said before, permits up to 45 units per hectare, and where developers request to go over that 45 hectares, as long as they stay under 60 units, we do have provisions for density bonusing, which is what they're seeking through the zoning process as well. So the proposed development achieves a density of 48 units per hectare. So the site is 1.7 hectares in size. So that's just a little under 6 additional units that would be provided on the site. And as mentioned, in exchange for the increase of density by 3 units per hectare, roughly 17% of those units would be rented at an affordable rental rate, which equates to 14 new affordable residential rental units within North Granville. Next slide, please. So it's staff recommendation that council approve zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 1120 for the lands located at 5870 County Road 19 to amend the zoning from highway commercial exception to residential fourth density exception holding to permit the construction of 4 3-story multi-residential units on the property. And just a reminder, the holding zone provision will be placed on the property to require a site plan agreement. Next slide, please. My contact information is there for anyone who hasn't already notified us that they want to receive notice of the decision of council. So if you want to ensure that you get receive notice, by all means, please send me an email and I will ensure that our planning department includes you on our circulation list. And that concludes my formal presentation. At this time, I mean, if there's any questions from council, but if it might be beneficial to have FO10 present their presentation, and then there could be.
Thank you, Amy. I know the value in putting presentations back to back, because I think FO10 is going to provide more specificity and may answer some of the questions. That being said, just because your presentation was very comprehensive and substantive, I do want to just open it up quickly to council colleagues in regards to any questions at this stage. Council? Okay, so you're good then to move on. Oh, we have Councillor Sullivan. Thank you. Sorry, there's a lot of faces on the screen. Thanks.
Thank you. Sorry, just one quick question, and maybe this could have been for FO10. Of the 84 units, can you tell me how many are 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom? Are there any 3 bedroom units, please?
It's 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom units, and I can get the breakdown. I don't have it off the top of my head.
Okay, I'd appreciate hearing that. Okay, thanks a lot.
And Amy, again, to clarify the function of tonight's presentation, because obviously I know we have some residents here who have brought concerns forward. The function of tonight's presentation or tonight's discussion is to reconsider the residential zoning, right? That is currently available and what obviously Kevlar through FO10 is seeking. Other site plan considerations are obviously something that council will be able to directly address with staff within the month, within 6 weeks. Any sense of timeline there?
I mean, ideally, we bring the site plan forward when it's ready. So that's will involve the feedback from tonight's meeting. So we do. We will take back any comments received that can be addressed through site plan to see if we can finalize that. I mean, timeline wise, I know that Kevlar is very eager to get this moving forward. So it could be as early as the June meeting that this item comes forward to council, which would be in a month from now.
Okay, perfect. That being said, we appreciate how broad you went this evening because it gives us important context for the overall development. But I am heartened to see that we will have that other opportunity, of course, to weigh in specifically on elements pertaining directly to the site plan. Council colleagues, anything else? Okay, seeing nothing, there is an opportunity for public input, but we're going to go to the FO10 presentation. I do see Mr. Noseworthy now. I think you want to get in Mr. Noseworthy quickly before we move on. Oh, and you're muted. I know it's the Zoom. It's the Zoom plague. Thank you.
There's a lot going on. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Just to make a point that this is a separate meeting. It's a zoning bylaw meeting or amendment. But in the report from the Planning and Development Department, in the analysis, it says that the site plan control process has been concurrent with the zoning amendment process. I'm curious. Are we having both of these meetings concurrently, or are they distinct and separate by time?
I'll have Amy answer that. Go.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So the site plan process is not a public process in the sense of how we bring zoning bylaw amendments forward. Definitely the zoning process and comments we receive from the public, it can influence the site plan process itself. Council has asked that, especially on these larger files, that they come back for council consideration. So there'll be a final report provided to council with the final layout for the site plan. So in some sense, it's not public in that it's a meeting like this where residents will have a chance to ask questions. This is the time to ask your questions and express your concerns. The site plan process is kind of that finalization of this, of the development itself and the terms of how the site will be developed.
Great. So the questions we can present tonight are and will affect or can refer to the site plan.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I'll wait till the time comes. Thank you.
I guess I will start. Are you able to pull up the presentation? Thanks so much. All right, so we can just go straight to the next slide. So this is the survey for the subject property. So as Amy mentioned, the primary frontage is on County Road 19. So there's just under 30 meters of frontage there. There's also frontage along Wellington Road, but the distance between the actual road surface and the property is more significant, and there is a municipal drainage swale along there. So really the primary relationship of the property is to County Road 19. And the lot area is about 1.7 hectares of the lands outlined in blue. Next slide, please. So this is the site plan, and as Amy mentioned, we're proposing 4 3-story apartment buildings, a total of 84 units, and of those, I believe 58 will be 2 bedrooms, to answer Councillor Sullivan's question. So a high proportion of two bedrooms, the rest are 1 bedrooms. We're meeting the requirement for parking spaces, and we're also providing significant landscaped amenity area. So that's provided in basically 3 places. There's a large amenity area provided in between the 2 buildings to the west of the plan. There's a second amenity space provided between the building and County Road 19. And then there is that communal amenity space that runs from the existing retirement home along the south side of the property to County Road 19. In terms of circulation, I can address this in a little bit more detail later on, but as Amy mentioned, there will be an access, that first access beside the Giant Tiger up to County Road 43 will be constructed as the first part of the development, and that's to allow the continued function of the Giant Tiger, as well as fire access, and will also provide another alternative for residents in this division. And we've carefully run all the turning templates to make sure that the circulation on site works well. So with respect to the zoning bylaw amendment, as Amy mentioned, we comply with all of the height and setback requirements of the R4 zone that we are requesting, and that is the appropriate zone to implement the new residential designation for these properties. So the most significant site-specific exception, as was laid out, is the increase in density to 48 units per hectare, and as part of that, providing an affordable housing provision. So there are a few other site-specific exceptions that we're requesting. So if just on the next slide, take a look at how those have affected the site plan. So the primary one there are a number of exceptions, but they basically relate to the way that each building and the units at the ground floor will relate to the rest of the site. So unlike something like a townhouse development where each unit might have its own privacy yard, in this format, as a low-rise apartment dwelling, we're not providing that. There's still ample landscaping around each unit, but the setback distances between those units and the communal amenity spaces and the drive aisles and the parking are a little bit less than required in the zoning bylaw. So that is a number of those sort of more technical site-specific exceptions that we're requesting. And there is also the exception requested to consolidate the children's play area with just that overall communal amenity area. So I just want to emphasize we're not reducing the amount of amenity area that we're providing, but just rather than have a separate children's play area, which may not be as well used or may not be appropriate on this site, we're just providing it all as sort of a landscaped amenity area that's free for all residents and also for neighbors to use. And if we go to the next slide, that's a zoom in on the entrance at County Road 19. So if you can see the sort of the shaded shapes are the truck turning templates. So normally the zoning doesn't permit a residential driveway to be shared with a commercial driveway for understandable reasons. But in this case, we wanted to only have one entrance on County Road 19 to ease the traffic. So we're looking for a zoning exception to allow that driveway to be shared. And we've, carefully, our traffic consultant has carefully assessed it to make sure that it will all be compatible. So that's sort of the last site-specific exception we're looking for. And here you can also see a little bit better the relationship of the building to the road, the way in which those pathways along the property will connect to Wellington Road. And the bottom green area is the area for stormwater management. So that'll be a green area. We can now go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, the height of the buildings, 12.1 meters, is well within what is permitted in the R4 zone, and it's also shorter than the current height permissions for the property, which are 13 meters. So 12 meters is also just 1 meter higher than the current zoning for the Forest Creek subdivision. So as you can see, the design of the buildings has really been intended to provide a residential feel with the peaked roofs, with the building articulation. So the intent of this design is that it really fits well with the existing sort of character of the neighborhood, and that it meshes well. So these are the elevations for the 18-unit building, but the next page, which shows the 24-unit building, are quite similar. We can now go to the next slide, which is a colored landscape plan. So this might be helpful to understand in a little bit more of a readable way what we're planning in terms of those landscape amenity areas and the landscape buffers. So we're proposing to really do some generous tree planting on this site to provide a buffer, and also just to create an enjoyable, a cool, and an attractive atmosphere for the residents. So you can also see where the pathway comes along the back of the property. And I should mention, this is not specifically a zoning issue, but we know it is a great concern for the residents. So Kevlar will build a fence along the back of the property line, and we'll work out the details of that with the municipality through the site plan process. Next slide. So this is the formal landscape plan that we have submitted for the site plan, and that will be approved for that process. So it just has some more detail, but it's essentially the same as the previous image. And then if we just go to the final slide, or the next slide. This is a 3D perspective, and so it should provide a little bit of a better sense of the landscaping, as well as the relationship of the buildings to the existing buildings along Forest Creek. So we've done our best to provide sort of the maximum setbacks possible. And again, that the design of the buildings, the peaked roofs, the 3-story height is all sort of intended to provide a transition from the single-family homes in Forest Creek to a slightly higher residential density, and then eventually to future commercial development along County Road 43. If you can go to the next slide. And that's just another view. So this is looking basically from County Road 43 north. So again, you can see sort of the overall relationship of the development and how it's intended to work. So that's the end of my presentation, but I know there may be more specific questions. So I'm happy to answer any of those that may arise. And I should also just mention, for those who missed it, my name is Bria Aird. I'm a planner at FOTEN. My colleague Paul Black, also from FOTEN, is here, and as well Kevin and Larry from Kevlar are also here. So thanks very much.
Okay, thank you very much. As we are in a public meeting, I will follow the script to make sure that we are adhering to the process. So council obviously has heard from the applicant's representative, and now it's really open to questions or comments from members of the public or council who have questions or statements. So I see Mr. Noseworthy, Deputy Mayor, with their hands. I'm going to flip to the next screen. If you can use that raised hand function, it's very helpful if you know how to do that. Or literally raise your hand. Okay, so I've got Mr. Noseworthy, Deputy Mayor, and Councillor Barkley. I'll recognize you three, and then we'll go from there. Thanks very much. Deputy Mayor.
Did you say Deputy Mayor or Robert?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Noseworthy, go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Robert Noseworthy, 51 West Era Way. So I will be a resident soon enough. I'm building on West Era Way, but at the other end. Full disclosure, I support the development of apartments and the affordable housing initiative that's going here. However, I do not support the density. I find the density too high. So at least you know where I stand on this as we come off of it. The first comment I had, and thank you very much, Bria, for your comments. You mentioned about the privacy yard. So the driveway will be shared between the existing commercial and proposed residential development. I look at building D, which is the back of the giant tiger, and you're proposing to reduce the, what do you call it? You have a term for it that you use, the privacy yard. So you would reduce the privacy yard down to 3.7 meters, is that correct?
Yes. Although it is the setback to the drive aisle is 4.7 meters in that location.
Okay, that's fine, 4.7, okay. So what we have is we have an 18-wheeler truck delivering to Giant Tiger within 15 feet of the window of the back of that building D. Does that sound correct?
That will be the condition sometimes.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you very much. Okay, it just seems a little close to put the commercial space that close to the privacy yard, but again, this will be council's decision. With reference to the Parkland, this council was elected on the basis that Parkland would be included in every community. I see there is a small space between building A and building B, and I see the space between building D and the homes that back from West Arrow Way. I'm just curious, why are we excluding the Parkland? And I understand the frontage on County Road 19. However, this is a park for the residents of the 84 units. Wouldn't it make sense that they have a park where they can all go to, which would be large enough to be able to accommodate all 84 of those units and maybe not as many members of the public?
I'm not sure I understand. Sorry.
Okay, let me rephrase that.
Yeah.
Behind building D is a stormwater management facility, is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So all the mature trees that are behind in that area will be removed and replaced with new plantings that range from one caliper of 2.5, 3 inches. Is that correct? Or about 12 feet tall?
The caliper is right, yeah.
Okay, as long as council is aware of that. Just want to make sure. So those mature trees might take some time to, or those trees would take time to come back to that mature level. In slide number 7, where you showed in your presentation, you showed an elevation of the building. Those buildings are, if I understand this correctly, those buildings are somewhere about 12 or 13 meters tall. And
they're 12.1 meters tall, yeah.
Thank you very much. So I look at the new plantings that are shown, and in that representation, it might be a little erroneous, is that it's shown that they're almost at the height of the roof line of the building, which would mean that they would be upwards of 12 meters. In fact, the new plantings will probably be somewhere around closer to 3 meters. And I wonder if next time we could see the slides and showing them more in proportion from the beginning, as opposed to something that's maybe 30 or 40 years from now. Just a comment. Okay. Pedestrian traffic. I know in the previous presentation I had attended, Mr. Schuldeis had mentioned that he'd be very happy that people from Forest Creek and people from the apartments would go over to the Starbucks as an example. My question is really for the county, but I think if it could be passed on, is that what is the plan for the county for that pedestrian traffic to cross over County Road 19, considering the increased amount of traffic that's going to be on there? So I know you can't answer that today, but I'd suggest that it be raised up with them, make sure that we have the appropriate crosswalks or some kind of ability for them to cross safely. I'm reminded as a long-term resident of Kempville that when the Walmart Mall was put in, unfortunately, we had a person get hit by a car in front of the LCBO, and that person passed away. And then the traffic calming measures were put in. I'd suggest that because of this increased density, that the traffic calming measures be put in at the beginning and not after we've had an unfortunate accident. So just a note for the future, please. Also, the last thing I have was the the proposed pathway, but I understand there's a fence going there now. That was really, I can speak to this with experience. I was the developer of that land and the builder of those homes. That was to be an underground stormwater management culvert to the Forest Creek Pond. So that part is correct. It was never intended as a pathway. There were fences put up around that easement, but the fence on West Arrow Way was removed because the residents wanted to mow the field that was created there. So it was never planned as a pathway. It was planned as an underground stormwater management culvert. So I just want to make that point, just to make sure that we're there. Those are my questions and my points. I just hope that they're brought up. Oh, I'm sorry, there is one more. You mentioned about the affordable housing component, which is incredibly important and very much appreciated. I was just curious, of those, are any of them made available or AOTA compliant, which is the Accessibilities to Ontarians with Disabilities Act?
All right, I will try to answer those questions that I can. So I think the first question you asked was about the adequacy of the parkland. So, I mean, obviously this is a discussion between the developer and the municipality, and a big part of the reason that this development is not providing parkland is because to do that, it has to be, an attractive park for the municipality to take and operate. So that condition wasn't there. That being said, of course, it's really important to Kevlar and to the success of this development that there is adequate park land that functions as parkland, adequate amenity space. So that is why we're providing in excess of what the zoning requires, and also why the development is providing that pathway amenity, so that not only the residents, but also residents of the retirement home and the surrounding area can benefit. I should clarify with respect to the fence. So Kevlar has agreed to build the fence. We will be taking direction from the municipality as to whether to create that pathway connection. We understand that that's quite contentious, and some of the residents in Westero Way are in opposition to that. So from Kevlar's perspective, there's no desire to push that through if there's opposition. That being said, as a planner, I've spoken with the municipality, and it's my opinion that providing that pathway would help to achieve the active transportation goals that are set out in the official plan and then are consistent with the principles of good planning. So I think there are good reasons to put that pathway through there. We will take the direction from the municipality on that. So and then obviously it's always helpful to know the history of when and where that easement was created, but that's I think a matter for the municipality to decide. In terms of the affordable housing, I don't believe that the units will be AODA compliant, but I will confirm with the architect and I will provide that information so that it can be considered at the site plan stage when sort of the details of the affordable housing will be worked out.
Okay, so just with another question, if I may, with reference to building B and C, I see the parking lots are on the side of the buildings. And again, you've reduced the space between the parking lot and the building. The privacy yard now goes down to 3.7 meters or 12 feet. And I'm wondering if a car is backing in and the exhaust is running from that vehicle, it seems to me fairly close to get to within 12 feet of a building, or especially someone's patio door or their window, for a car to be backing up. So just a note for the site plan that it seems imprudent to reduce it down to 3.7 meters, but that's just an opinion. It can be, of course, overridden. So that, and And what about the County Road 9? I'm sorry, will you take it up with the county for the pedestrian crosswalks or the pedestrian crossway across County Road 19 so they can do that safely?
Maybe we can have Amy comment on that. This has also been a question that council's been asking, how to manage what has already increased traffic on County Road 19. And there are some connectivity plans because of multi-use pathways that are already planned for County Road 43. So Amy, I know it's not your wheelhouse. I know this is being driven by Public Works, but do you have any comment in terms of some of those connectivity issues when we're talking about that major County Road 19?
I think it's something that I can work with Director Dunlop, our Director of Public Works, on to address with the counties. I wouldn't have a quick answer solution, Mr. Noseworthy, as to how we can address it. But these are, as we talk about future developments within Colonnade and the relationship of how this area works, it's something that is on our radar, and we will continue to work with the counties to see how we can address it. It's very optimistic. We're working on getting 43 expanded, and it's not a far stretch to think that these offshoot portions of county roads, such as County Road 19, could follow in the future to ensure that we're creating the right and safe crossings for pedestrians and cyclists and anybody on any kind of mode of transportation that's not a car.
Yeah, and I know Director Pub.
You muted yourself again.
I'm sorry. I know Director Dunlop did speak to some of those plans when she was presenting on County Road 43. I'm not sure they're sufficient, but certainly there are plans in the works. So I think a refresh for council on that would be useful. Mr. Noseworthy, you've presented lots of food for thought. I think most of your questions were answered. I'll go on to Deputy Mayor at this stage, and we'll work our way through the speakers list from there. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of points, and the question for Rhea is the 5% land or cash in lieu, or for 5% land that the municipality would pick up as parkland. I get what you guys are doing. It sounds like you're actually doing more. I think that was what I understood, rather than a half an acre, which would be pretty small for a park. I've been guessing that you guys are actually going far over that half acre is my assumption by the look of the plans. I didn't do calculations, but I don't know if you guys have added that up. Are we talking about an acre and a half when you total them all together? What are we talking about there?
So we are proposing a total of 2,600 square meters. So I'm just quickly doing the conversion to an acre. Sorry, it's just going to take me a second. I don't have the mental math to do that conversion. So it's.
If I might, while
I can keep going. I got more questions. You muted yourself, man.
I have a noisy cat in the background. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Okay. While those calculations are being made, I wanted to point out to Mr. Noseworthy that. And Nancy, you mentioned it, that we've been talking about that crossing of 19 for probably a year and a half or longer. And not just, of course, well before this development, just with Westera alone, the amount of traffic and walking. I mean, Doreen O'Sullivan living in there has pointed out to us quite a bit. So we have definitely put that on the radar and want to talk to county about it to make that done properly. I know, and Nancy mentioned when we did do the review of the latest 43 plans, they are talking about the multi-use path coming down 19 from 43 as well. So I think we can integrate something there. So we're definitely on the radar. We're not going, we're not going to let it slide without putting some pressure on to have that done right. I'm not concerned about that. The other thing, Bree, when you're doing your calculations, I noticed your slides, you're talking about density. You had density of 40 to 48. Amy Martin, I understand it's 45 per hectare, 45 to 48. Is that the correct number, or 40 to 48 the correct number? Or did I get those numbers wrong completely?
Now you're going to make me pull up my official plan. Whatever.
And I'll keep, let me see, what else did I have? Also, I don't think it was answered, but my understanding from the Kevlar development people that these apartments were all going to be accessible or handicap accessible somehow. I'm not sure if they meet a certain rating or not, but I understood that they were all going to be built to some compliance with accessibility. So maybe you guys can answer those.
Should we have Kevin or Larry maybe speak to that? Because I know it was a particularly, I think, strong vision of theirs to create a kind of accessibility for many of those units. Perhaps it doesn't meet a certain standard. Kevin or Larry, I don't know who's on the call. Does anyone want to speak to that?
Yeah, we didn't have them set up as a certain standard, but we're trying to make them all the doorways wider for wheelchair accessibility. The elevators that are going in are going to be stretcher proof, like the same thing we put in at Curry Park. So if an ambulance has to come to the site, they can get in and get somebody out on a stretcher. So we're trying to make all the doorways wider, but we're not necessarily making everything absolutely wheelchair accessible. So where you can slide under a counter and a kitchen sink, but being able to be mobile throughout the units inside a wheelchair is what we're trying to do.
And you'll update us, Kevin and Larry, on what units may in fact reach that kind of highest
100%.
bar, if you will?
Yeah, we're working with Peter Mansfield, our architect. We're finalizing the final detailed construction drawings. So we're still going over doorways and door sizings and everything else as we speak. So we can update yourself and Deputy Mayor McManaman right away.
Okay, thanks. Bria, do you have the green space sizing?
Yes, so it's 0.6 acres.
Okay.
So yeah, but it is larger than what would be provided as a park. And so there's sort of two parts. There's the amenity space, which is a zoning requirement, which has to be provided regardless. And then there's the cash and lieu. So there will still be obviously a cash going to the municipality to support parkland acquisition and development. And then there's the amenity space. And as part of that, we were providing the communal pathway amenity that'll be accessible to the community. So sort of bridge that.
So we're getting above the half acre that's required, plus we're getting cash in lieu in this particular deal. Okay, thank you very much for that clarity. Did you guys get the density clarity number for me?
It's 45. It's 40. Sorry, it's 45 units. I found my official plan off to the side here, and as per 10.2.6.1, it's up to 45 units. Yeah. And then, like I mentioned, we do permit density bonusing up to a maximum of 60 units.
Okay, so officially we're going from 45 to 48. Just on Breeze, your document said 40 to 48. Okay.
My apologies for the typo.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. Thanks for the clarity.
Deputy Mayor, is there anything else? Okay, good. I'll go to Councillor O'Sullivan. Sorry, I apologize. I think it was Councillor Barkley and then Councillor O'Sullivan. Did I get the order right? Colleagues? Okay.
I'll take it.
Okay. And I just, again, want to acknowledge anyone else, any member of the public. I'm just looking at my screen. I see 25 participants. I don't know if there are others who have, in fact, said they wish to speak. I'm just scrolling through. Heather, do you see anyone who's raised their hand?
No, Your Worship.
Okay. So let's go to Councillor Barkley and then we'll go to Councillor Sullivan. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Bria, for the presentation. I've got one question and a comment, and I'll try not to belabor it. Just to follow up and get a little bit more clarity from a question that Mr. Noseworthy had about what's described as a landscaped area, but I understand is a stormwater management area south of Building D. Yes. So I know the trees will have to be removed in order to create that stormwater management. Is it a pond? What do we have there?
So it's not a pond, it is a depression. So in an extreme stormwater event, there would be some water that would pond there, but most of the time it would be a grassed area. So
it'll be grass, it won't be shrubs or cattails, or what kind of vegetation will be there?
I believe right now it'll be grass. There will be plantings at the edge of it to help sort of reinstate a bit of a buffer. But certainly the landscaping of that is something that we could look at. What exact plants are there?
Okay, just wasn't clear from your answer earlier. And my comment, while I appreciate Mr. Noseworthy's history of how the storm water connection came about, I think it's a wonderful opportunity that we should seize to build a pathway between these two communities. And I appreciate your comment that it was good planning to have a pathway between the Forest Creek and the new apartment building. So I appreciate your comment on that. And just to like to add, because I'm sure it'll come up later, that it's part of council's work plan to build connections between communities. And I think this literally would build a connection. So that's my comment, and I'll turn it over to the next one.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor O'Sullivan.
Thank you. So in terms of connections and safety for pedestrians and cyclists, etc., if that walkway goes all along the back of the property and goes to County Road 19, I think it's really important that there is a pedestrian crosswalk put there. And I know that that's going to be something that we address as a council with the counties. But the other concern is then to make that connection to go somewhere. Right now, that crosswalk would only lead to the Kevlar property where the Starbucks is and the new development there right now. So I understood that Kevlar was going to create a connection between that property and the Colonnade Mall. So I'd like to hear from either Larry or Kevin about that, because otherwise it's sort of a dead end with that place, and there's still no safe way to get to Colonnade unless there is a sidewalk put down the side of 19 on the east side of 19 that would connect down to Ryan's Well Road. So that's far enough away from the County Road 43 that I know that 43 expansion is not going to address that connection issue. So maybe Kevin or Larry could let us know what the plan is to connect their commercial space with the Colonnade Mall.
So I can address that. So our intention is to link the Kevlar properties to the Colonnade site, but we can't connect to a Colonnade site without getting permission from the Colonnade folks themselves. So I don't think they're going to object to have a walking path coming into their property to bring customers for their tenants. But, once we get further along with the walking path, we have to get their approval and get it in writing before we can access walking paths between Kevlar and the Colonnade site. But that is our intention, is to link the pathways from the retirement home across the back through the Kevlar site or the Starbucks site, connecting it to the Colonnade site.
Okay. So can you give me an idea when that would happen, or when you would start that process? Because even now, people who get into the Starbucks complex, how would they get from there to Colonnade Mall without taking their lives in their hands going down County Road 43 or 19, if they're walking or on a bike?
Yeah, there is a walkway, there's a pathway behind the Starbucks site that runs from County Road 43 right through to County Road 19. What we're proposing is that we can link before you get to County Road 9, so from the back end of the property where the new building just got constructed, where the physiotherapist is going, from there, crossing over in behind Canadian Tire, and then connecting the parking lots. That's our intention. This is going to get constructed during the landscaping, when we're doing the landscaping of the site. We're not going to do it at the beginning of construction, because we're going to be tearing the pathway in and out. So as the buildings are completed, our intention is to go ahead and construct the walking path and connect the sites. So I don't see any objection from Colonnade, us offering them to connect a walking path to bring tenants, like I said earlier. But we're going to certainly go, and we have to have permission, and we have to get it in writing for them before we just go and connect the two pathways. But that's the intention. It always has been the intention. We stress that from the beginning.
Okay, thank you. So it's part of the landscaping plan for that commercial property at that corner.
That's going to be the time of construction of the pathway. We're going to do it when we're site grading and topsoiling and sodding and planting trees. We're going to go ahead and construct the pathway at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, as we are in a public meeting, I just want to emphasize that we are here to also hear from members of the public. We've heard from one in that Mr. Noseworthy has come forward. Are there others that wish to speak this evening? I just want to make sure I'm not missing anyone. Of course, virtually it's always a little more difficult. So I'm just scanning the screen for either anyone to turn on their camera or to raise their hands. I'm not seeing anybody, but I will just make sure through Ms. Babcock-Cormier that she too isn't missing anyone who would like to speak. I see Councillor Strachan. Councillor Strachan, I will recognize you. I just want to make sure that any other members of the public also get recognized. Okay, so we have Ms. Richardson. Thank you, Karen. So actually, we'll go to you if you don't mind, and then we'll go to Councillor Strachan because I know Council has been asking lots of questions. So go ahead. Thank you.
I have a question about the path that's coming, the one that Ron described as stormwater area. And as my understanding is the residents of Forest Creek have spoken fairly loudly about the fact that they want that fenced at the back. I'm wondering why council is not listening to what the residents are asking for.
Okay, well, maybe we'll just have Amy speak to that. And when you say fenced at the back, Amy, can you put up on your screen what specifically we're talking about here?
Pollock will have to share the slides.
Okay.
I don't know. Pollock, actually share Bria's because Bria actually had better close-up imagery of the property.
All right, just an indulgence, please, while I pull that up.
Amy, maybe you can speak to rationale, fencing, right, versus no fencing in this instance?
If along the back rear property lines?
Yes.
So as Bria, Bria had mentioned, Kevlar is in agreement to fence the shared property line with the residents of Forest Creek. That's something that we will require through the site plan process, so there will be a note on the fencing provision that has to be required.
Okay.
If you Pollock, just flip a few slides here. And I'll tell you when to. Bria provided a better zoomed in. Well, maybe she didn't. Apologies. Sorry.
I think the landscape, the colored landscape plans, probably the best image there.
The shortfalls of technology when you can't control the screen.
All right.
Sorry,
Karen,
Paula.
does that bring you some comfort? What staff are saying in terms of the need for fencing?
Well, I'm being specific to the opening between between 11 and 17 West Air Way.
The municipal block.
Yes.
Is your question in relation to fencing that off completely?
Yes, closing that entrance from the path. It's not a pathway, which Ron described as it was a pathway to nowhere at the time the subdivision was built. So will that be fenced completely off?
You mean closed, so there's no connectivity between the neighborhoods, correct?
Right.
Okay, now I understand your question. Okay.
Yes.
And I guess, Karen, to your point, I think we've been hearing a variety of perspectives in regards to the value of closing off that area or not. I think it's something that we're addressing in site plan. I don't actually think we are making that decision this evening. The decision this evening is around the zoning amendment for residential density. So I think it was our understanding as council members that we would still dialogue with staff, hear, obviously the benefit of tonight's discussion before we made that call. Is that correct, Amy? I have that right?
Yep.
Okay.
It just sounded from one of the councilors.
Indeed.
That it was going to be left open. That's why I brought it up. That's all.
No, I appreciate your point, and I think there's a variety of perspectives within and among council, and I don't think we really had a chance to confer in any sustained way. So appreciate that you've asked that question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor Strachan, and then I'm making a call to any other members of the public should they wish to come forward. I'll hear from Councillor Strachan in the meantime.
Thank you, Mayor Peckford. I think that to the point that was just made about the pathway, there's a lot of pieces to consider here. I think connecting communities and allowing for active transportation, throughout our urban core especially, I think is an important key factor to this, notwithstanding having heard from residents. I think that there's a lot to consider there. So I will have to give some thought to my own perspectives on this, obviously, as well. Once we get into further discussions with the rest of council. To the points that Mr. Noseworthy has raised, I think that there are some very good considerations being put into place here regarding density. The Parkland, the cash in lieu for Parkland is, it's unfortunate that it is one of those positions, but I think after having seen what the layout is and where the green space will be allowed, I think it does make sense in this case that there's times when just simply saying we should just forge ahead with that Parkland in that state as a half an acre. I think that there's smarter decisions that can be made based on that additional information. I am firmly in favor of making sure that there's safe pedestrian crossings. Obviously, we'll be adding more individuals who would want to access Colonnade and the Kevlar properties and so on and so forth. And having those pathways is fantastic, and making sure that there's a way for them to connect across. But to crossing 19 is a significant issue. I know that our Public Works Department has had a lot of success recently in making progress in providing safer crossings and all of that within our entire community as the municipality as a whole. And so I hope that as we're talking towards the revitalization, the change of 43 and the rest of the changes that we have highlighted, including that particular intersection, that we'd see some progress with that in line with and ahead of when people would be taking up residence in the new location. I think that affordability is huge. It's been a huge priority for this council. Obviously, we know that, especially now, we're running into places that are less and less affordable across our community and beyond. And so being able to nail that down to a certain percentage is very important. And I think is, again, in line with the priorities that we've set as this council. The accessibility portion, if it doesn't meet a standard and a particular level, but it meets a certain threshold, I guess I would like to find out more about that. And I think, Kevin, you've already said that you'll speak to that later on about exactly how many will have it and what standard or level they're at, however you want to phrase that. So I think that that's all very good. Personally, we've heard a lot from residents regarding parking issues in the urban part of Kempville, in the old town, especially, where there are houses that don't have enough driveway space. There's all sorts of issues regarding parking, as well as for commercial parking purposes. Having that percentage of parking spots over and above and beyond the number of units, I think is a good sign. 84, and I think it was 105 parking spots. Those are good numbers, I think, and it would reduce the likelihood of needing overfull parking in other areas that are not designated for those residences. So a lot of good points raised, Mr. Noseworthy. So thank you for bringing them to our attention, as well as the comments from residents. And I think you've given us all a lot to consider. And the presentations, I think, were very thorough. So thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Starkey. And I'm just scanning the screen once again. Deputy Mayor, I see you there, and I will recognize you. I just wanted to also add a bit of perspective here. I know, I think pre-COVID, we gathered with many of the residents in a meeting that was convened by Kevlar and Councillor O'Sullivan to really get our heads around this development. This land was obviously commercial, zoned commercial. County Road 43, in fact, is almost exclusively commercial. And there seemed to be an opportunity here to, in fact, provide some desperately needed well-built rental units, as a way to transition between commercial and residential space. When you look at the lands that Kevlar owned, I know that certainly Jim and I had some really hard discussions with Kevlar in terms of the percentage of affordable units that they would be willing to build, and we came to an agreement on 17%. And I think there were 17% affordable, but my perspective on this, hearing from residents each and every day, where unfortunately we have a rental market that is basically evaporating before our very eyes, and people facing eviction every single day. So to get an infusion of well-built quality rental into the community that also incorporates a small percentage relative to the overall build, but a notable percentage nonetheless of rental, and in my estimation is a good land use project. I think that certainly we wanted to do development better when we looked at how different neighborhoods integrated, and we are a growing community, and that does create stress and anxiety, there is no doubt. But that growth is also creating a significant demand for obviously home ownership and rental. And to that end, you know, we really looked at what Kevlar was proposing, and we asked them to make some significant adjustments leading up to this meeting. And that included greater setbacks because we weren't initially satisfied with the setbacks. So in fact, they reoriented a building at our request because we are unsatisfied with the kind of proximity, even though it met, you know, whatever technical standard that was outlined in the Planning Act. We felt like they needed to go beyond that based upon some feedback. So we have far greater setbacks than would have been the case. We also wanted a limited number of balconies facing the Forest Creek neighborhood. So we asked for that. And that also obviously required a reorientation of a couple of buildings and different spacing of those buildings. We also wanted to make sure that that pathway in the back did create better connectivity. One of the shortcomings, quite frankly, of the Kemptville retirement home is that it's an island unto itself, and that's a problem. It really is a problem, and I think we were looking for better coherence. We've got a long way to go. I completely endorse a controlled pedestrian crossing coming out of the Kevlar developments, moving over to the Starbucks and Co property and leading into Colonnade. So I think council has given this, you know, a lot of deliberation. I don't think it's perfect. I don't think in a growing community, anything is really perfect at this stage. A lot of people, you know, have moved into this community with an expectation that there would be, that the neighborhoods they moved into wouldn't necessarily change. And they were often sold to people with an expectation that there wouldn't be change, or it would be very, very hard for someone to move in next door or to create another development in close proximity. So I think this is a work in progress. I think certainly some of the questions raised tonight are worthy of our consideration as we go into the site plan process. As Amy's indicated, prior to our election, site plans were often not necessarily presented to council. Holding symbols weren't necessarily applied. So council wishes to be vigilant here and wishes to, you know, give real thought to some of those areas where, you know, the existing neighborhood of Forest Creek is feeling some pain around, you know, obviously changes to their neighborhood by virtue of what's coming in close proximity. But I think we're working hard to get to a better place when it comes to development. And, you know, this proposed development is one other test of that. So I'll leave it there. That's just some reflections I have, and I'll go to Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a comment and maybe a question for Karen Richardson. I've lived in this community for over 27 years now, and of course it's grown quite a bit, far more than probably a lot of people have noticed. There was no 416 when I moved here, so it's grown quite a bit. I've seen lots of changes, but I've also noted that throughout North Granville there are many connected communities. We're not as good as it could have been, but that's definitely council's goal is to connect more of these communities. And that's what we're working on. And like I said, there's lots of communities who are already connected. I guess my question to, and I want to say to Karen too, we are listening. We've read many, many letters from the residents, and we are listening. We just are not at a point where we're making any decisions. So it's not like we're not listening. We're not at a state where we have to make any decisions. We want to weigh everything out. But I would like to ask Karen, I guess, if she would like to answer this question, is exactly what is the concern with having a pathway between two brand new communities, to a sense, to a degree? You know, I doubt there's a lot of interest for the Kevlar residents to walk into the Westera property. I suspect, though, the Westera property, people may want to use that path to 19 more than the other way around. But anyways, you're asking us to listen. I want to listen. I want to hear what your concerns are, fears, whatever they are, to leave that path open to have a connected community. Thank you.
Karen, do you want to answer that?
I happen to be the resident who lives beside. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Karen.
Sorry, Karen, you froze up there.
Oh, sorry. I'm the property owner who lives right beside that easement. And I know now, and I'm sure it will only continue to get worse, the number of people that walk through there with dogs who don't clean up after themselves, the amount of extra traffic it's going to bring into this neighborhood from people, and I don't know for what purpose they would want access to this, nor do I see why we would want access into the back of that property when we can get to wherever we need to go by walking down the road and over to the rail trail, over to Walmart. We have a path that leads over that way. I just don't see that it provides much for West Era residents to access the backs of apartment buildings. Like I'm not seeing what the value is of connecting the community, us and the apartments or the retirement home. I can understand the pathway along the back of the property for sure, but that pathway that comes through the easement is a connection that I don't see as going anywhere. Currently used by dog walkers, that field.
Thank you.
I don't see the path being used for anything other than that right now.
So those are West Era residents coming onto that property, going through your property.
Yeah, well, not through my property, through that easement.
Yeah.
Easement, right, correct. Thank you.
Okay, Karen, thanks. We appreciate that additional information. It's good to get that perspective. So once again, I'm going to do a final call for comments from members of the public.
Yeah, I can't get on. How do you get on?
Oh, Mr. Fata, we can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me, good.
Yep, we can hear you.
That path should be closed because when they have construction over there, where are they going to park? And they're going to walk through that path. They're going to park on closer laneways. So all we got to do is call the law enforcement to ticket those people. They're not going to park in the parking lot for the Giant Tiger because the Giant Tiger can complain. If you won't park KFC, they're going to complain. Where are they going to park?
So, Mr. Fata, I can't. You're turned, so you're a little bit difficult to hear. I think I understand you saying that you think there is not enough parking provided for the apartment buildings.
Well, it's under construction. We're at the workers. Where are they
I see the construction vehicles.
There, walk through the path, go to work.
Okay.
Because you won't park in the parking lot over there because they're going to complain. The Giant Tire complain. The Dollar Tree is going to complain.
Okay.
Where are you going to park?
Kevin and Larry, can you speak to that? I know you oversee a lot of construction.
Like a typical job site, Mayor Pickford, what we're doing is we're going to create a staging area. And we're going to have a site trailer. Everything is staying on our property. People will not, and trades will not be going over to the West Era subdivision and parking on the street, blocking laneways and walking over. It'll be signage, and we'll be making sure that all our tradespeople and contractors are parking on our site in our staging area for this site. They won't be parking in West Area. Sure.
When you build the old age home, you got excess parking. You won't have it this time.
I'm sorry, sir. I didn't hear what you said.
When the old age home was built, they would be parked on the vacant property, right?
When we built Curry Park, we were limited on staging area. This is not the case on this site. We've got a very large property. We own it all. From basically from the Starbucks site right through to the retirement home, but we are going to be constructing a staging area for the construction vehicles. So unlike Curry Park, where we were very congested on putting a lot of units on a very tight piece of property, this is not the case on this site. So you can rest assured you will not have construction vehicles parking in your subdivision.
Yeah. And as far as the dogs, they're going to walk around their pond. Who's going to clean up?
Well, I can attest that I believe that the people in the community that we propose to build are going to be using as Bria said, the 0.6 of an acre of green space, and they're going to be walking their dog and there. I don't suspect they're going to be running over to the West Area subdivision. That's our intentions. But yeah, that's all I can say. I think they'll be staying to our side of the property.
They're going to be coming to West Area, walk around the pond because over there it's congested. Cars parked all over the place, and they're not going to walk in the little 10 by 10 area for your dog. They're going to go and walk around and make an exercise on their properties. I mean, they're in the subdivision. Let them walk in your plaza over there.
Well, hopefully with more connectivity, they'll have many other options. I think that's regardless of whether or not that easement area is fully closed off or not.
It should be closed off.
Okay, thank you for expressing your opinion. That's helpful. Thank you, Mr. Fata.
All right, thanks.
Okay. Any other members of the public wishing to speak? I see a Chico. Is that someone who's here for the public meeting?
Okay.
I believe that's Mr. Fata.
Oh, that's right. That's Mr. Fata turning off his camera. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I appreciate that. All right, so one last call for any members of the public who may wish to speak in regards to the development. I'm not seeing anyone. Any final comments from council before we move to close the public meeting? Okay, then with that, I'm just pulling up my script. Apologies, just give me a second. We will move to close the meeting. I think Ms. Martin, you've heard quite a bit about how, in fact, we do need to, I think, proactively address some of the County Road 19 considerations.
Sorry, Nancy, there's another hand up.
Okay, that's not a problem. I have yet to close the meeting. I'm not seeing that hand, so someone will have to advise me. Oh, Alicia and Tony. Hi, Alicia and Tony.
Hi, we were on the call because of the application A0421 applied by D&G Landscaping, Inc. in cooperation with Christine McGay of Q9 Planning and Design.
I believe your application is coming up, second or third. Heather, can you confirm that, please?
Sorry, apologies. Ms. Martin, can you confirm which application that is?
Yeah, so that application is part of the Committee of Adjustment. So right after the council meeting is adjourned, we have just 2 more files to go through. Then we will hear the Committee of Adjustment item.
Okay, thank you. My apologies. I assumed that the meeting was closing.
Understood.
Oh,
yeah. This particular public discussion on the proposed Kevlar development will be closing, but then we'll move on to other matters, of which there are several. So thank you, Alicia and Tony, for your patience. I apologize for the delay. Obviously, a first discussion item that was very lengthy, but important to council and the community. Thank you for your patience. So with that, I'm not seeing further indications of anyone wanting to speak. So I am now going to close the public meeting. However, I would like to share the following. Anyone who wishes to be advised of the outcome of this meeting, or who would wish to provide written comment regarding the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, can still do so after this public meeting. Written comment can be received up until the zoning bylaw amendment is considered, but Amy, of course, we're doing that right now. So is there any opportunity for written comments?
Not after the bylaws passed, although I do encourage any individuals, if to ensure if they want a copy of the notice of decision, anyone who submitted comments will receive a copy. But by all means, those in attendance tonight, just send me an email just indicating that you want to receive that notice of decision.
And again, of course, we're talking about a zoning bylaw. We're not addressing all matters pertaining to the site plan. So there's another discussion to be had by council. And of course, we encourage any member of the public to reach out to Amy directly, who has a lot of knowledge on this particular proposal, or please reach out to a member of council. Thank you. So the public meeting is closed. And therefore, I'm going to go to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. The proposed motion is the following: that council approve and enact bylaw 5112 to amend the zoning for the lands located at 5870 County Road 19 from highway commercial to residential fourth density special exception, which is an R4 13H amendment. This will amend bylaw 5012 as amended, being a bylaw to regulate the use of land and the use of buildings and structures within the municipality of North Granville. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Should there be a will? I have Councillor Barclay and Deputy Mayor. Thank you. Is there any further comment on the bylaw amendment as proposed? Seeing none, Amy, can you just help me understand the interplay between counties who I think also had to approve the rezoning from commercial to residential. Do they take our recommendation or do we take theirs? How does that work?
So the official plan amendment that was passed back in February, the United Counties is our approval authority for official plan amendments.
Okay.
So they've approved that. The zoning bylaw amendment does not, they don't have to provide any approvals over that. That is clearly a municipal function.
And that speaks specifically to residential density.
The actual permitted uses on the property and setback provisions and development requirements.
Understood. Okay. So council, raise your hands if you have any final questions. Otherwise, I will call the vote. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, please. Okay. Thank you. That motion passes. We appreciate Fotan and Kevin and Larry being here and members of the public who've made clear some of their concerns. And we appreciate everyone who's shown up this evening to provide insight on this particular proposal. Appreciate it. So with that in mind, we'll move on to the next item in question for which some members have been patiently waiting. And that is in regards to 304 Prescott Street, zoning bylaw amendment 0521. And I'll ask Ms. Babcock Cormier, I think you have to read the script for the public meeting again. Is that right? Okay. If you unmute, perhaps
Yes.
you can read that on our behalf. Thank you.
Sorry, Your Worship, I missed that.
If we could just have you read the public meeting protocol again, that would be helpful.
Yes, thank you. Sorry about that. Council will now hold a virtual public meeting to consider an application for lands legally described as 304 Prescott Street from institutional I to downtown commercial CI to permit the conversion of the former high school into a multi-commercial development. I must advise you that this meeting is your opportunity to voice any objections or concerns you may have with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. If an appellant does not provide comments at this public meeting or written submissions before council adopts the proposed amendment, the local planning appeal tribunal may refuse to consider their objections. Any persons who wish further notice of the council's decision concerning this matter should give their full name, address, and postal code to Amy Martin, Director of Planning and Development, via email following adjournment of this public meeting. Contact information can be found on the notice of public meeting and will be provided at the end of the presentation. Anyone wishing to ask a question during the public meeting can do so by using the raise hand feature on Zoom. When asking a question, please identify yourself and provide your address and postal code for the clerk to record as part of the public record. Are there people here for this public meeting? If so, could you please acknowledge yourself through the raised hand feature on Zoom? I'm not seeing anyone, Your Worship. The meeting will now be passed over to Amy Martin, Director of Planning and Development.
Thank you.
All right, so our second bylaw amendment that we're considering tonight is for 304 Prescott, also known as the former North Granville District High School building. Next slide, please. Just for context, the property is located on Prescott Street in downtown Conceptual. And next slide. And here's just an aerial photograph of the property. You can see that the former high school consumes quite a large portion of the property, and there is parking at the rear of the building. Next slide, please. And here's just a street view from Google Street View what the front of the school looks like. You can see that there's, or the former school, sorry, lots of adequate trees already established on the lot, and it's within our downtown, so it's quite accessible to pedestrians. Next slide, please. So we received an application, ZBA 0521, to permit the rezoning of the former North Granville District High School, being 304 Prescott, from the institutional zone to the downtown commercial zone. So currently the institutional zoning does not permit commercial uses within the building. The property is designated as downtown commercial as per Schedule B of the official plan, and as per the official plan policies of the downtown commercial lot, of downtown commercial designation, commercial uses are encouraged. And when it comes to residential uses, they're encouraged to be located in upper stories, especially on Prescott Street, to maintain that commercial element on the main levels. The downtown commercial zoning permits a variety of commercial uses, including retail and office space. And as mentioned, it does permit residential units in upper stories. The applicant has requested that the property be rezoned to permit the creation of a commercial hub within the building. At this time, there are no proposals to expand the building beyond its existing footprint, and there's no proposals to create any residential units on the upper stories. So right now the focus is creating that new space for commercial businesses, just utilizing the existing bones of the building. Next slide, please. This is compared to the last zoning amendment we just heard, a rather straightforward request. The rezoning would match to the downtown commercial zoning, would match the downtown commercial designation. So, you know, through our official plan, we're encouraged where we have opportunity to match our official plan designations with zoning to do so. So to that end, it is our recommendation that council approve zoning bylaw amendment ZBA 521 for the lands located at 304 Prescott Street to amend the zoning from institutional to downtown commercial to permit the establishment of a commercial hub in the former high school building. I believe that's it.
Apologies, Your Worship, you're on mute.
I know. Thank you. Thank you, Amy. I will now turn it to any members of the public or council colleagues in regards to this proposed amendment. I do have a question. I know many people actually did reach out when they understood that there was a business potentially moving in to one particular annexed area of the old high school, which I understand is the library. I don't actually think council has decided to create a commercial hub, you know, in the high school. There are significant limitations from what I understand in terms of occupancy of the main building because of environmental and structural issues, including the roof, existence of asbestos, et cetera. And we have pursued previously and continue to pursue a potential partnership to allow for both commercial and residential use. So I guess I just want to be clear with the community that I don't think it's our intention to convert the entire building at the present time to commercial space. But we did obviously, I think you saw merit, and we understand that a business has identified the opportunity to be in a particular area of the building, and that obviously for those reasons, zoning it commercial at this stage makes sense, but there may be forthcoming opportunities to do a mixed commercial residential build should the right partnership, which certainly, you know, council and myself have been pursuing and exploring, should that opportunity solidify. Is that an accurate statement, Amy?
I mean, that's what council is pursuing, and that's your position and your will. I do want to just stress that the downtown commercial zoning does permit residential on upper stories and commercial on the main floor. So you would, like, from that perspective, you wouldn't have to rezone the property unless you were converting it fully to a residential use.
Understood. Yep. Okay. So what we're doing now is shifting from institutional to a commercial / potentially residential zoning. Is that correct?
A commercial zoning which allows for accessory apartments in the building. Yeah.
And given that this is a multi-story building, right, it's not insignificant that there could be some residential builds as part of that commercial zoning.
That, again, it's going to come up to the owner of the building as to how they want to pursue with development, but they have that flexibility with the C1 zoning to create residential units if they wish, or to, you know, create additional opportunities for commercial uses within our downtown.
Indeed. I think what I'm signaling, however, is that I don't see that council is full scale endorsing an exclusively commercial use of this building. My 2 cents. Deputy Mayor, and then Councillor Strachan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First off, Ms. Martin, is there a representative for this building here? Anybody to speak of the bill? Questions for the building?
Not that I see. I don't see the property owner here, or his consultant. Okay,
because I'd like to express my concerns for the building. It's in very disrepair, and a retail property was allowed to move in without proper zoning, and so I have concerns that where we're going with the plans of this building. I hear what Nancy, Madam Mayor, is saying. And I wish that the property owner would step up so we could ask some questions very specific to this building because, you know, there's the deficiencies there. And I don't want to see another established business, which has moved into or tried to move into that building and has, you know, put on hold and really made the municipality look bad in a way that we weren't allowing that person to, you know, to operate, and it wasn't the case at all. So I do have concerns with with not with the zoning, but just the way the whole process is coming to council from this particular owner. Just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Strakian and then Councillor Barkley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I echo what Deputy Mayor has stated regarding the current state of the building and commercial and businesses going in there prior to the appropriate zoning and all that, those changes coming into play at a time, sort of putting the cart before the horse. So it would be nice to see something great happen with this building. I think it's an important part of our community and important to the community. So hopefully it can we can move forward in a productive way. I have a question here, and I don't see it in your notes, and I don't know if I missed it in your presentation of it, but is there a heritage status to the frontage of that building and that still remains, and that because it was only the front, I believe, that needed to be maintained? You could gut it from the back and do whatever you needed to, but it needed to look the same from the street. Is that still applicable, and does this have any impact on that heritage status?
So my understanding is that we have a heritage easement over the cenotaph that's located on the property. The proposal, as of right now, the zoning would permit the commercial use, and my understanding, any of the renovation work or proposed conversion of parts of the building wouldn't impact the cenotaph itself. It is protected, so I mean we do have bylaws that and requirements around that to preserve that feature.
Okay, my understanding, my understanding was that it applied to the front of the building as well, but perhaps that was just my own misrecollection of the way things played out. Thank you.
I can look into that a little more in detail, just to provide you with that information after the meeting as to exactly what is protected. My understanding was that it was the cenotaph feature, but I could be mistaken, but I will endeavor to get that information to you.
If it is the building, in the case that if there is a heritage status for the building, then would this zoning change have any impact on that, or would the heritage status still be protected?
It would still be protected. That's protected by bylaw.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Councillor O'Sullivan.
Thank you. Actually, Amy addressed the comment I was going to make, is to be reassured that the cenotaph was protected space. So that has already been spoken to. The other question I had is, at the present time, is there only one commercial tenant interested in moving in there? Like, that's a big building to have one tenant, and we're doing this for one tenant. And then what happens during renovations, etc., if the asbestos is uncovered and building has to be emptied and secured for any period of time? So I have concerns about the bones of the building. I'm sure it's probably got some good bones, but the skin on it, it may not be so good. So those are my concerns. Are we doing this for one potential commercial establishment within the building?
I believe it's to provide opportunity for future commercial uses to be established within the building beyond the one business that is trying to locate there. What I will say is that building permits are required to convert space within the building, whether it's to confirm that the space meets the building code requirements, because you have to remember it was an institutional building. The building code has different requirements for commercial buildings. I know that, and forgive me for not knowing the proper term, but they do have to provide, as part of the building permit submission, a record of like hazardous substance abatement. So that is a requirement that they will have to provide to us as part of their building permit submission.
Thank you.
Councillor Sullivan, my understanding, and maybe Deputy Mayor, you can speak to this more specifically, because we've had this discussion, is the particular area of the building they're occupying is not in the main structure. It's in an annex part of the building, which is in better condition and newer. Deputy Mayor, do you want to add?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. It's definitely a different part of the building. It's actually the library that was built onto the, if you're facing the building, it's on the left side of the building at the front. Anyways, my question though, to Amy, maybe this is a little off topic because we are in a zoning meeting, but I was obviously, I just don't know how did this tenant get so far to get into this building, start whatever they're doing without our building people being involved, and how far along did our building inspectors take this or put a stop to the whole thing? I just don't know the history there. I just know they showed up one day. I noticed the sign was on the windows, and they were, they had moved out of their old spot and into this new spot. So how does that? I mean, maybe we have no control over that at all, but I'm just expressing the concerns of how this whole thing played out, and I just don't want to see it happen again. And is there a way for us to be ahead of these type of developments and these type of buildings?
So in the case of that business, it was alerted to us through social media. Because they'd posted online, and then it was brought to my attention as the director of planning and development that we had a potential business relocating into a location where the zoning wasn't appropriate for it currently with the institutional zoning, and then building code requirements for converting that space, again, because institutional buildings and commercial buildings have different requirements under the code. When we discovered that, we did issue a letter to the property owner to let them know that here's our process for rezoning the property, and here's what we would require for a building permit submission to help get things moving along the way. Because we, here at the municipality, we don't want to see businesses without a space to occupy, and understanding the urgency around that, have done our best to try and expedite this as quickly as we can to address the situation. Moving forward, I mean, it's typically these requests for redevelopment of properties, usually there's pre-consultation with the municipality as to what people want to do. I know that there have been discussions with the property owner in the past from my predecessor, so I wasn't involved in those discussions, but typically at that point, that's where you would have those, okay, what are you proposing to do with the building? Here's our process, and provide them with the guidance that they need to move forward. In a nutshell, typically how our process works, but especially too, like when we have larger properties exchanging hand, it's a little more tricky with existing buildings than vacant property, because if it's vacant property, then they're going to have to go through that full process, whereas an existing building might be harder to capture as part of that development pre-consultation.
So our building department hasn't been involved yet or doing any kind of preliminary inspections?
They've had preliminary conversations and have reviewed preliminary documentation at this point.
Okay.
I haven't checked in this past week, but I do not believe we have a building permit submission yet.
Thank you, Ms. Martin.
Okay. Any other comments in regards to this file? Seeing none, I think the reality is this is a major, not just a building, but the footprint of the old North Granville High School is quite large. It's a very strategic location. And while we're absolutely pleased to see a particular business owner gaining access to a very small portion of the building, I think there's lots more discussion to be had on what ultimately is the fate of the main building. Whether or not other uses may be equally valuable. But of course, I think as Deputy Mayor has noted, really what we're doing today is accommodating a commitment that was made by the property owner to a business that sees a lot of merit into relocating her business to this part of Kemptville's old downtown neighborhood. And that is, I think, what brings us here this evening. So I will look for Deputy Mayor. Would you like to move that motion then?
Apologies, Your Worship. The public meeting should be.
Oh,
closed.
I'm sorry. I apologize. Okay. No, it's fine. I will make one last call for public comment. I don't believe we have a member of the public who's here this evening in regards to this matter. Alicia and Tony, are they representatives of this particular zoning? No, they're the next one.
They're the Committee of Adjustment.
Oh, great. Of course. Okay. So we don't understand there's any member of the public here this evening. So with that in mind, we would like to advise, of course, that you can reach out directly to Director of Planning, Amy Martin, or ourselves. We are now going to consider the bylaw amendment. So any written comment will be basically moot unless the motion is defeated when it comes to opposition to the rezoning of this property. I am now going to close the public meeting and ask council's consideration of the motion, and that is that council approve and enact, I should say, that is that we amend the zoning for the lands located at 304 Prescott Street from institutional to downtown commercial to permit the conversion of the former high school building, and that council approve and enact bylaw 5221 to amend the zoning for the lands located at 304 Prescott Street, to amend bylaw 5012 as amended, being a bylaw to regulate the use of land and use of buildings and structures within the municipality of North Granville. Deputy Mayor, would you like to move that, please?
Yeah, I will move it, just with a slight comment that you know, that our staff watches this project very closely, as well as council, because like I said, I don't think it's moved along like it should have. And I don't want future residents and or business owners getting trapped, you know, by moving into this building and things aren't equipped. So I'm hoping our department will keep a close eye on things. So I shall move.
Thank you. I have Councillor Barkley as a seconder. Okay, I will call the question then, unless there's further comment by council.
I would like to just make a comment here, and I suppose, you know, I don't think the position that we're in right now is a comfortable one to be in, where you know, we have a business that's moved in and requires this zoning change, is my understanding, in order to continue being in that space and operating, and that the position that we're in right now, you know, pits us against a local business owner if we were to say that we're not comfortable with this change. So I would just like to voice that right now, that that's not a situation that I think we should be put in, or one that hopefully we will have we can avoid in future.
Thank you. Councillor O'Sullivan.
I just wanted to echo the comments from Deputy Mayor McMenamin and Councillor Strachan. I think it's rather unfair to the business and to us that this has gone this way, and that we're kind of put in this position. So I completely agree that we need to keep a close eye on it, and I will reluctantly in some way go on to agree with it.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you, Councillor O'Sullivan. Anything further? I think our seconder is Councillor Barkley, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right? Okay. You're comfortable seconding, Councillor Barkley?
Absolutely. I agree with everything said about the responsibility of the building owner to follow the right process. So.
Deputy Mayor, just want to verify you're still comfortable as the mover, or would you prefer someone else move?
I'll move.
Okay. Then I'll call the question then. All in favor, please? With reluctance, clearly. Okay, so we will also initiate some further dialogue with the property owner to see how we can move forward. There was a lot of conversation in the early days after the acquisition of the property by the current owner. So I think more dialogue is now warranted. That's dialogue that we, I think, have been attempting to have over the last year, but haven't necessarily been successful. All right, I'm going to move on. Again, we're at ZBA 1420-335 Pine Hill Road, and I'll have Ms. Babcock Cormier read once again the script for the public meeting, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council will now hold a virtual public meeting to consider an application for lands legally described as 335 Pine Hill Road from residential first density R1 to residential second density R2 to permit the development of semi-detached dwellings. The lands at 335 Pine Hill Road are also the subject of a concurrent consent application, file number B-153-154-20 under the Planning Act. I must advise you that this meeting is your opportunity to voice any objections or or concerns you may have with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. If an appellant does not provide comments at this public meeting or written submissions before council adopts the proposed amendment, the local planning appeal tribunal may refuse to consider their objections. Any person who wishes further notice of the council's decision concerning this matter should give their full name, address, and postal code to Amy Martin, Director of Planning and Development, via email following adjournment of this public meeting. Contact information can be found on the notice of public meeting and will be provided at the end of the presentation. Anyone wishing to ask a question during the public meeting can do so by using the raise hand feature on Zoom. When asking a question, please identify yourself and provide your address and postal code for the clerk to record as part of the public record. Are there people here for this public meeting? If so, can you please acknowledge yourself through the raise hand feature on Zoom? I see one individual, Jordan Jackson. Thank you. I'll now pass the meeting over to Amy Martin, Director of Planning and Development.
All right, thank you. So I'll be giving a presentation, and I believe Ms. Jackson has a presentation as well to follow. She is the consultant on file for this particular amendment. So our final zoning bylaw amendment of the evening is for 335 Pine Hill Road. Next slide, please. The property is located on Pine Hill Road, south of George Street West, and it abuts a multi-residential development as well as a single-family dwelling, and it backs onto the Country Walk subdivision. Next slide, please. So the property is currently developed with a single detached dwelling. The severance application will sever off the portion of land just on the north side of that existing single detached dwelling, where a semi-detached dwelling is proposed to be constructed. And then the second severance would permit the subdivision of the semi-detached dwelling into two separate and conveyable units. Next slide, please. So here's the proposed conceptual site plan. The semi-detached to be built on the property will meet all the requirements of the residential second density zone. So there are no exceptions that are required for the property. Ultimately, when it comes to our official plan policies, we're encouraged to provide opportunities for infill and intensification where it's appropriate, given the low-rise residential adjacent and the fact that we're starting to see more infill development for semi-detached dwelling units within Kemptville proper. The proposed development is appropriate for the location. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, the proposed zoning would rezone the property, or sorry, a portion of the property from R1 to R2. So it would permit that semi-detached dwelling unit, and it is subject to two severance applications as mentioned before. So rezoning the portion of the property would permit the development of that semi-detached dwelling unit. And as mentioned, there will be no special exemptions required for the proposed development as it meets the required setback provisions. Originally, the original report had required a holding symbol, but through discussions with the developer and their consultant, we determined that given the relatively small scale of the development, that wasn't necessary. We still are going through the process of a site plan agreement just to solidify and confirm the stormwater management requirements on the site and grading and drainage. But again, this is a relatively small infill project. Next slide, please. So here's just that table that was on the site plan itself, just pulled out so you can see how the requirements that are being met. The front yard setback will be 9 meters, so that it maintains a similar front yard as the surrounding single family dwellings in the area. So trying to maintain the character of the street. So extra care and attention is being taken in how this building is being constructed on the lot in the context of the surrounding neighborhood. And next slide, please. And so it is the recommendation that council approve the zoning bylaw amendment for 335 Pine Hill Road from the residential first density to the residential second density to permit the construction of a semi-detached dwelling. And that is the end of my formal presentation. If there's any questions for me, I'd be happy to field them, but we do have Jordan Jackson here from Novatech to provide some additional information.
Council colleagues, do you have questions for Amy, or should we hear from Jordan first?
Just a quick one regarding the elimination of the holding symbol. So I just wanted to point out that the description of the motion as read includes mention of a holding symbol. And I understand that's something that you want to remove from the motion. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I will then ask Ms. Jackson to add any comments. Ms. Jackson?
Sure, thank you, Your Worship. So my name is Jordan Jackson. I'm a planner with Novatech. Just for formality, our address is Suite 200 240, Michael Copeland Drive, Ottawa, K2M 1P6. Just by way of background, we had filed concurrent applications to both the municipality for the zoning bylaw amendment and 2 severance applications to sever the lot. So the property on Pine Hill Road is developed with an existing single dwelling, and the northern portion of the lot provides enough area to accommodate a new semi-detached dwelling. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, please. The lots to be severed are so that each half of the semi-detached dwelling unit could have their own legal ownership and could be conveyed individually. So these applications were filed in December, and we had received conditional approval from the county's May 31st this year. So one of the conditions was to apply for this zoning amendment since a semi is not a permitted use. Next slide, please. And as you can see from the conceptual site plan, we are able to site a semi-detached dwelling on the severed lots without needing any exceptions to the standard R2 zone. Next slide. Just wanted to share some conceptual elevation drawings of what the semi-detached dwelling would look like, just to demonstrate that it fits in with the character of the surrounding neighborhood on Pine Hill Road. Each half of the semi-detached dwelling will have an attached garage, and its own separate driveway. And then the building will be 2 stories in height. The building form is in keeping with the character of the surrounding neighborhood. I'd be happy to, we understand that we have to go through site plan control, and our client anticipates starting construction as soon as we've gone through the whole approval process. So I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any of council or the public.
Okay, colleagues, any questions in regards to this particular residential dwelling? Have you received any comments, Amy? Just can you confirm for us? Have you received any comments from members of the public?
We've received no comments from members of the public, and RVCA had no objection.
Okay. So, and you would have posted signage for how many days?
So notice on the property was posted 20 days in advance of the meeting, and neighbors within 120 meters were notified by written mail.
Okay, and not a peep?
Not a peep.
Okay, I'll go to Deputy Mayor. Deputy Mayor, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Ms. Jackson, welcome back. Nice to see you.
Really.
I don't have any real comments on this property, but when are you bringing us our next hotel? We're looking for a hotel.
I don't know how to comment on that. I'm not aware of any of that type of commercial development in the works.
Just fishing.
It is nice to see your face again, Ms. Jackson. I hope you're doing well.
Thanks. You too.
Okay, I'm going. If there are no other comments from council, is there other comments? Seeing none, then I'm going to ask Heather to close out the public meeting, and then we'll consider the resolution. Heather?
I'll just read the script. Council will now hear from the applicant. They have, followed by questions or comments from members of the public. There aren't any who wish to comment, either for or against the proposal. Following any comments from the public, the applicant will be offered an opportunity to respond to questions raised. All persons wishing to address the proposal will ask their questions through the chair. Please state your name, address, and postal code prior to council. Council members may also wish to ask any questions through the chair to those making presentations. Please be advised that any member of the public who should wish to provide written comment regarding the proposed zoning bylaw amendment can still do so after the public meeting is adjourned. Written comments can now be received up until the zoning bylaw amendment is considered by council. It's intended that the zoning bylaw amendment will be brought forward for consideration May 12, 2021. This public meeting is now closed, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. So with that in mind, I'll read the motion for consideration. That is that council amend the zoning for the lands located at 335 Pine Hill Road from residential first density to residential second density holding to permit the construction of a semi-detached dwelling on a portion of the property, and that council approve and enact bylaw 5321 to amend the zoning for the lands located at 335 Pine Hill Road from residential first density to residential second density holding to amend bylaw 5012 as amended, being a bylaw to regulate the use of land and use of buildings and structures within the municipality of North Granville. A mover, please, for this motion. Oh, I've got 4 hands. I'll take Councillor Sullivan. And who else raised their hands? Did everybody raise their hands? Oh, and I'll take Councillor Strachan. Thank you. Any further comments or questions?
You mentioned holding symbol. I thought we were removing the holding symbol, or is that a moot point?
I'll refer to Ms. Babcock-Cormier or Amy for that answer.
It's my advice that we remove the holding at this time, given just the relatively small nature of the project, and that the site plan at this time will just be addressed stormwater management and grading of the property.
So to that end, are you seeking a amendment to the motion, Councillor Barkley?
Yeah, I would seek an amendment.
Okay, and can you recommend the language for that, Ms. Martin?
I will defer to our clerk as to that formal process.
Heather, you're on mute.
Thank you. So right now, the resolution, Ms. Martin, as it reads, is that council approve and enact bylaw 53-21 to amend the zoning for the lands located at 335 Pine Hill Road from residential first density to residential second density holding. Is it the reference to holding that needs to be removed?
Correct.
Okay, so then as amended, the recommendation would read that council approve and enact bylaw 53-21 to amend the zoning for the lands located at 335 Pine Hill Road from residential first density to residential second density to amend bylaw 50-12 as amended, being a bylaw to regulate the use of land and use of buildings and structures within the municipality of North Granville.
Okay, is that considered a friendly amendment, Ms. Babcock-Cormier?
Yes, it is. I would just need a mover and a seconder for the friendly amendment.
Okay, I've got Councillor McManaman and Deputy Mayor and Councillor Barkley moving a friendly amendment. Are there any comments on the friendly amendment, Council? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of the friendly amendment? Good. Now we're back to the original motion. Do you have the movers and seconders captured, Heather, for the original motion as amended?
So the original motion now, so what you're actually going to be moving now isn't the original motion. It will now be this amended
motion.
Yes.
Do the original movers, does the original mover and seconder stand? That's my question.
No, that motion has since fallen aside and it's been amended such that the mover is Deputy Mayor McManaman and the seconder is Councillor Barkley.
Okay, and they're moving an amendment. So basically we now have an amended motion on the table.
That's correct.
That has already been moved and seconded.
Yes.
Okay, am I calling the vote on the amended motion?
Yes, please.
Okay, all in favor, council colleagues? Okay. Does that conclude business for this particular Pine Hill property, Ms. Babcock-Cormier?
It does, Your Worship.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so with this in mind, colleagues, we on the remaining agenda for council, we have the appointment of building officials, which was addressed through the consent agenda. Don't need anyone to jump in on that. I'm aware of that. So we are now going to informational reports, of which there are none, correspondence, of which there is none. I do not believe there's a notice of motion unless council colleagues have one this evening. Colleagues, a notice of motion. I see none. The introduction and consideration of bylaws has already been addressed. Is that correct, Ms. Babcock-Cormier?
That's correct, Your Worship.
Okay, so we are now to period for questions from the public and the media. This may strike you as strange because we've just had 3 public meetings where there's been ample opportunity for comments from the public, but this is a council meeting for which additional comment from the public is now offered. So with the remaining members of the public, and I absolutely understand that I think Tony has been patiently waiting for nearly 3 hours for a committee of adjustment meeting that has yet to begin, but will shortly. Is there any other member of the public wishing to speak this evening? Is there a member of the media wishing to speak this evening?
Your
I can
worship.
see a member of the media. Yep.
Your worship, sorry. Paulina actually just emailed me to advise that she doesn't have a camera or a mic this evening. She has been watching and she does not have any questions at this time.
Thank you. I don't recognize any other names, so I assume that's our only member of the media. Thank you, Paulina, for being here. And without any indication that there's anyone else wishing to speak, then I will go to close the meeting. Confirmation bylaw. Colleagues who would like to move the confirmation bylaw. I've got Councillor Sullivan and Councillor Barkley, please. And that, of course, is standard practice. And Heather, I'll have you read the motion, please.
That bylaw 55-21 to confirm proceedings of council at its regular meeting held on May 12, 2021 be adopted and passed.
I'll call the question, please. All right, who would like to move adjournment, colleagues? Deputy Mayor and Councillor Strakian, we are moving to adjourn at 8:48 because we've been meeting for nearly, I guess, 2.5 hours. I am calling a 5-minute break. I want to apologize. I do think the applicant for the Committee of Adjustment has waited far too long. I do think we need to revisit processes. Perhaps there's a way to reorder these meetings when we anticipate a fulsome debate or discussion when it comes to a particular item on the council agenda. We are adjourning for 5 minutes.